What is happening? Where did she come from?
Look at her attire. It's monstrous!
It must be an ill omen for the wedding.
What year is this? What is this place? The stern man who'd ordered her seized frowned deeply. This is the royal palace of Joseon. Joseon. The word hit Gabriella like a physical blow. Joseon Dynasty, Korean history. That ended in 1897. That was over a century ago. That was impossible. Hi guys, welcome to Korean Chaebol Love Stories. Before we get into today's story, I want to say thank you for clicking on this video. And thank you for liking and subscribing even if you haven't yet. Now back to the story. The argument started over dishes, but it was never really about dishes. Gabriella stood in the cramped kitchen of her stepmother's Los Angeles apartment, her hands trembling as Margaret's voice rose higher and higher, each word a weapon designed to cut deeper than the last. You're 18 now, Gabriella. 18! Do you understand what that means? It means you're an adult. It means you need to contribute to this household or get out. Margaret's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the granite countertop, each tap punctuating her anger. Your father left us both when he died, but at least I'm trying. What are you doing? Dreaming? Reading those stupid books? Living in fantasy worlds? I'm looking for jobs. I'm trying. Gabriella's voice cracked, hating how weak she sounded. Trying isn't good enough. I have bills to pay, rent due next week, and you're walking around here like some princess waiting for life to hand her everything. Margaret's face was flushed now, her lipstick bleeding slightly into the fine lines around her mouth. Your father spoiled you, filled your head with stories and possibilities and complete nonsense. Look where that got him. Dead at 42 from a heart attack, leaving me with a stepdaughter who can't even wash dishes without breaking down. The words hit like physical blows. Gabriella felt tears burning behind her eyes, felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever Margaret weaponized her father's memory. She wanted to scream, to defend him, to say that her father had been kind and loving and that those weren't weaknesses. But her throat closed up the way it always did. I want you out by the end of the month, Margaret said, her voice dropping to something colder than anger, something final. Find somewhere else to live. Find someone else to disappoint. I'm done. Gabriella didn't remember grabbing her jacket, didn't remember walking out the door or down the 3 flights of stairs or onto the Los Angeles street where the late afternoon sun felt too bright, too cheerful for the darkness swallowing her whole. Her feet carried her on autopilot through familiar streets until she stood before the one place that had always felt safe. Chen's Antique Books was squeezed between a nail salon and a dollar store, its faded sign barely visible, its windows dusty and dim. Most people walked past without noticing it existed. Gabriella had discovered it when she was 12, back when her father was still alive, back when the world made sense. Mr. Chen, ancient and kind with ink-stained fingers, never minded when she spent hours reading in the corner, never asked her to buy anything, never made her feel like she didn't belong. The bell chimed softly as she entered, the familiar smell of old paper and dust, and something indefinably magical wrapped around her like a blanket. Mr. Chen looked up from behind the counter, his wrinkled face creasing into concern when he saw her tears. Bad day, little bird? Gabriella nodded, not trusting her voice. He gestured toward the back corner, her usual spot, and returned to his cataloging without another word. That was what she loved about this place. No questions, no judgment, just silence and books and the feeling that maybe somewhere in these stories someone understood. She wandered through the narrow aisles, her fingers trailing across worn spines, poetry, history, science fiction, romance, each book a doorway to somewhere else, anywhere else. Her vision blurred with unshed tears as she moved deeper into the shop, into sections she didn't usually explore. That was when she saw it. The book sat on a shelf near the very back, wedged between a cookbook from 1952 and a collection of Persian poetry. It shouldn't have caught her attention. The spine was plain brown leather, unmarked, unremarkable. But it was warm. Even from 2 feet away, she could feel heat radiating from it, like it had been sitting in sunlight, though this corner of the shop never saw direct sun. Gabriella pulled it from the shelf, gasping slightly at the contact. The leather was hot to the touch, but not burning. A living warmth that pulsed against her palms like a heartbeat. There was no title on the cover, no author name, nothing to indicate what it was. She opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed with age, covered in symbols she didn't recognize at first. Then her eyes adjusted and she realized they were Korean. Characters, Hangul mixed with Hanja, but arranged in patterns that seemed almost decorative, almost magical. The more she stared at them, the more they seemed to move, shifting and rearranging themselves like living things dancing across the page. "That's not possible," she whispered to herself. Books didn't move. Ink didn't rearrange itself. She blinked hard, thinking exhaustion was playing tricks, but the symbols continued their slow dance. Gabriella sank into the worn armchair in the corner, the book heavy in her lap. She should put it back, should ask Mr. Chen what it was, should do anything except keep staring at these impossible moving characters. But she couldn't look away. The symbols were beautiful in their strangeness, hypnotic in their movement. A tear slipped down her cheek, hot and unexpected, then another. She was crying again, crying over Margaret's words and her father's absence and the crushing weight of having nowhere to belong. The tears fell onto the open page, and everything changed. The moment the first tear touched the yellowed paper, the symbols stopped moving. They froze in place for one heartbeat too, and then they began to glow. Soft at first, a pale golden light that could have been a trick of the dusty afternoon sun filtering through dirty windows. But the light grew stronger, brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the warmth of the leather cover. "What?" Gabriella tried to close the book, but her hands wouldn't obey. Her fingers were locked around the edges, trembling but immobile, as if the book itself was holding her. The symbols lifted off the page. It was impossible, completely impossible. But Gabriella watched with wide eyes as the Korean characters peeled away from the yellowed paper like golden butterflies, hovering in the air between her face and the book. They swirled in patterns that hurt to look at directly, geometric and organic simultaneously, mathematics and poetry written in light. The bookshop began to fade, or no. Gabriella was fading, or falling, or being pulled somewhere. The familiar walls of Chen's antique books grew transparent like watercolor wash, and beyond them she could see something else. Silk banners, stone floors, mountains in the distance under a different sky. "Mr. Chen!" She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The golden symbols swirled faster now, forming a vortex that pulled at her hair, her clothes, her very substance. The book was burning hot in her hands, but she still couldn't let go, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but fall. The world inverted. Up became down. Left became right. Time folded in on itself like origami, and Gabriella felt herself being compressed, reformed, pulled through a space too small for existence. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the terrible sensation of being unmade and remade simultaneously. Then she was falling for real, tumbling through darkness that sparkled with those same golden symbols, falling and falling, with no sense of direction or duration. Was it seconds or centuries? Was she screaming or silent? She couldn't tell anymore. Reality had become suggestion, and the only solid thing was the book still clutched in her burning hands. Light exploded around her, bright and sharp and sudden. The sensation of falling stopped with brutal abruptness as her body slammed into something solid. Pain shot through her shoulder and hip. Air rushed from her lungs in a gasp that finally produced sound. Gabriella lay stunned for a moment, her vision swimming with stars and golden after-images. Slowly, sound filtered in. Gasps, screams, the singing of metal leaving sheaths, footsteps thundering on stone. She pushed herself up on trembling arms, her whole body aching from impact. The book had vanished from her hands. Or maybe she dropped it, she couldn't remember. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. She was in a massive hall, bigger than any building she'd been in before. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by red lacquered pillars carved with dragons and phoenixes. Silk banners in crimson and gold hung from the rafters, swaying gently despite no apparent breeze. The floor beneath her hands was pale stone, so perfectly fitted she couldn't see the seams, now marred by the torn remnants of a silk banner she'd apparently crashed through. And surrounding her on all sides were people, hundreds of people, all dressed in elaborate traditional Korean clothing, hanboks in every color imaginable, layer upon layer of silk and brocade. The men wore tall black hats and carried swords that were very much not decorative, judging by how many were now pointed in her direction. The women were in full traditional dress, their hair arranged in elaborate styles held with ornate pins, their faces painted white with red lips and delicate makeup. Everyone was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to horror to outright fear. Gabriella looked down at herself. Ripped jeans, sneakers, a hoodie with a coffee stain on the sleeve. Her long brown curly hair was wild around her face, completely loose, and untamed in a room where every other woman's hair was meticulously controlled. She looked utterly, completely, impossibly out of place. "Impossible," someone breathed in Korean. Gabriella's head snapped toward the voice. At the far end of the hall stood an elevated platform draped in more silk and gold. On it stood two figures in the most elaborate hanboks she'd seen yet. Clearly ceremonial, clearly important. A young man in deep crimson and gold robes with a golden crown on his head stood with his hand extended toward a woman in pristine white and gold, her face covered by an ornate veil. A wedding. She'd crashed through the ceiling of a wedding. No, not just any wedding. The decorations, the number of people, the weapons, the formality, this was a royal wedding. "Oh no," Gabriella whispered. "Oh no, no, no." The young man in the crown, the groom presumably, was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that would have been handsome except for the complete shock written across it. His dark eyes were wide, his hand still frozen in mid-gesture toward his bride. A man in elaborate robes and a different style of hat stepped forward, his face severe. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "Seize the intruder." Guards rushed forward, their armor clanking. Gabriella scrambled backward, her sneakers slipping on the smooth stone. "Wait, I'm not." Her Korean came out perfectly despite her panic, which would have been amazing under any other circumstances. "Please, I don't know how I got here." "She speaks our tongue." A woman's voice, sharp with suspicion. The bride had thrown back her veil, revealing a face of porcelain perfection and absolute fury. Her eyes, dark and cold, fixed on Gabriella with such hatred it was almost physical. "Who sent you? Who dares disrupt—" "No one sent me," Gabriella's voice cracked. "I was in a bookstore in Los Angeles. There was this book with moving symbols, and then I was falling and—" She stopped, hearing how insane she sounded. "Los Angeles?" An elderly man near the front frowned. "What province is that?" "It's not a province, it's a city, in California, in America." Gabriella's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "What year is this? What is this place?" The stern man who'd ordered her seized frowned deeply. "This is the royal palace of Joseon. The year is the first year of the Crown Prince's regency by the old calendar." Joseon. The word hit Gabriella like a physical blow. Joseon Dynasty, Korean history. That ended in 1897. That was over a century ago. That was impossible. This is a dream, she said, her voice distant to her own ears. I'm dreaming. I fell asleep in the bookshop and I'm dreaming. She pinched her arm hard enough to bruise. The pain was sharp and immediate and completely real. Not a dream, she whispered. Oh God, not a dream. The guards had formed a circle around her now, their swords drawn but not yet threatening. The young man in the Crown Prince, raised his hand slightly and every guard froze instantly. The gesture was minimal, barely more than a finger twitch, but the response was absolute. This was someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. He stepped down from the platform with fluid grace, moving toward her with measured steps. Up close, he was even more striking. Sharp jawline, intense dark eyes that seemed to see through her, an expression of carefully controlled curiosity beneath the royal composure. You claim to be from some place we have never heard of, he said, his voice deep and measured, with an accent that suggested classical education. Yet you speak our language without flaw. I don't know how. Gabriella's hands were shaking. The book? It was magic. Or maybe I'm crazy, or... You crashed through the ceiling of my wedding ceremony dressed in clothing I have never seen, speaking perfect Korean while claiming to be from across the ocean, and you suggest you might be insane. The corner of his mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. That is perhaps the most sensible thing said in this room today. Despite everything, despite the fear and confusion and complete impossibility of the situation, Gabriella almost laughed. Almost. Then the bride spoke again, her voice like ice. Crown Prince Ji-hoon, surely you cannot entertain this obvious spy's ridiculous claims. She has disrupted the most sacred ceremony of the kingdom. She has humiliated me, humiliated you, humiliated Lady Hana. Ji-hoon's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. I am aware of the disruption. He was still looking at Gabriella, though, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, though that was impossible. They'd never met. Couldn't have met. What is your name? He asked quietly. Gabriella? Gabriella Bolton? Gabriella. He repeated it carefully, the foreign syllables strange in his mouth. An unusual name. Everything about this is unusual, she whispered. For a moment, something almost like understanding passed between them. Then the severe older man stepped forward again. Your Highness, we must proceed with... The ceremony is broken, Lord Seok. Ji-hoon's voice was flat. By law and tradition, once interrupted, it cannot continue. The wedding must be postponed. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Lady Hana's face went from porcelain white to flushed red. Postponed? Postponed? Her voice rose to a near shriek. 5 years I have prepared for this day. 5 years of training, of sacrifice, of making myself worthy to be your bride, and you would postpone our wedding for some foreign harlot who... Lady Hana, Lord Seok's voice cracked like a whip. Control yourself. But Hana was beyond control now, her perfect composure shattered completely. Look at her. Look at her shameful clothing, her wild hair like some untamed beast, her... Enough. Ji-hoon didn't raise his voice, but the single word silenced the entire hall. He turned to Lord Seok. The law is clear. The ceremony cannot proceed. We will reconvene when the circumstances of this intrusion have been investigated. But Your Highness, Lord Seok's voice was grave now, you know what this means. Without the wedding, without the marriage, you cannot be crowned. And if you cannot be crowned, Parliament will... I am aware of the political implications. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. Nevertheless, the law is the law. Unless you suggest we ignore our own sacred traditions? Lord Seok bowed stiffly. Of course not, Your Highness. Ji-hoon turned back to Gabriella, and she saw something complicated in his eyes. Curiosity, yes, but also something that looked almost like relief, quickly suppressed. You will be detained in the eastern quarters, he said formally. You will be questioned. If your story proves false, the consequences will be severe. And if it proves true? Gabriella asked, finding her voice despite her fear. Ji-hoon's eyes met hers directly, and for just a moment his carefully constructed mask slipped. She saw wonder there, and confusion, and something that might have been longing. Then, he said quietly, we will have a much more interesting problem to solve. Guards surrounded Gabriella, not touching her but making escape impossible. As they began to lead her away, Lady Hana's voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a blade through silk. She must be executed. Hana stepped down from the platform, her elaborate wedding hanbok trailing behind her like a river of white and gold. This is an act of treason, an attack on the crown, on me, on everything we— Lady Hana, you overstep. An older woman's voice, smooth as honey and twice as sweet, interrupted from the side of the hall. Gabriella turned to see a woman in deep purple robes, her face painted white, her lips crimson, her eyes sharp as obsidian. She moved with predatory grace, a smile fixed on her face that never reached those calculating eyes. Surely the Crown Prince knows best how to handle this unusual situation? Queen Dowager. Ji-hoon's voice was carefully neutral, but Gabriella caught the tension in his shoulders. Your counsel is, as always, appreciated. I merely suggest caution, dear stepson. The Queen Dowager's smile widened, showing perfect teeth. After all, this foreign creature has already disrupted one ceremony. Who knows what other chaos she might cause if handled improperly? Perhaps the dungeons would be more appropriate than the eastern quarters. The eastern quarters, Ji-hoon repeated, his tone brooking no argument. She will be comfortable and under guard. That is sufficient until we understand what has occurred. The Queen Dowager's eyes flickered with something dark before her pleasant expression returned. Of course. Your wisdom exceeds your years, Your Highness. She glanced at Gabriella with undisguised contempt. Though I wonder if your judgment might be clouded by curiosity about our unexpected guest. My judgment is clear, Mother. The title was courtesy, not affection. As is my authority in this matter. Authority? Lord Seok stepped forward, his elderly face grave. Forgive me, Your Highness, but we must speak plainly. By law, you have no true authority until you are crowned king, and you cannot be crowned until you are married. This interruption means Parliament must convene. Until they decide how to proceed, I'm afraid the governance of the kingdom falls to Lord Seok as right hand of the late king. The Queen Dowager interjected smoothly, her smile sharp. As tradition dictates. How unfortunate that your wedding has been so dramatically postponed, dear Ji-hoon. Lord Seok bowed slightly, his expression neutral but his eyes watchful. Parliament will convene to discuss this complication. Until a resolution is found, I will execute my duties as the law requires. It's rather strange a stranger dropped from the sky just when the union is about to be sealed. Perhaps she wasn't acting alone. Ji-hoon's hands clenched at his sides, the only outward sign of his anger. You suggest I arrange for someone to crash through the ceiling of my own wedding ceremony? I suggest nothing. I merely observe. The Queen Dowager circled slowly, her robes whispering against stone. Though others might wonder why you seem so protective of this intruder, why you insist on comfortable quarters rather than a cell. Why you look at her with such fascination. The hall had gone silent. Every eye was on Ji-hoon now, waiting to see how he would respond. Gabriella felt her face flush hot with embarrassment and fear. She hadn't asked for any of this, hadn't wanted to disrupt anything. She just wanted to go home, except she had no idea how to get home. Ji-hoon's face remained impassive, but when he spoke, his voice was cold enough to frost the air. I look at her with the same attention I would give any puzzle that requires solving. Nothing more. And I insist on proper treatment because we are not barbarians who throw confused foreigners into dungeons without investigation. If that offends your sensibilities, Mother, perhaps you should examine why cruelty is your first instinct. The Queen Dowager's smile finally faltered. Dangerous silence stretched between stepmother and stepson. Then she laughed, light and musical, and completely false. Spoken like a true king. How sad you cannot claim that title yet. She turned to the crowd. The ceremony is concluded. Guests may depart. Parliament will convene to discuss this complication. Until a resolution is found, the wedding remains postponed. As the crowd began to disperse in urgent whispers, Ji-hoon gestured to the guards. Take her to the eastern quarters. She's to be treated as a guest, not a prisoner. Food, water, clean clothing, and someone who can explain our customs to her. Your Highness? Lady Hana's voice was desperate now. All her earlier fury collapsed into something that sounded like heartbreak. Please, we can still... The ceremony can be redone in a few days. We can... Hana. Ji-hoon turned to her, and for the first time Gabriella saw something like pity in his face. This requires investigation. We will speak when the time is right. Investigation? How long will that take? Days? Weeks? Hana's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what this humiliation means for me, for my family? 5 years, Ji-hoon. 5 years I have prepared to be your wife, your queen, and you dismiss me like someone whose wedding was just interrupted by impossible circumstances? Ji-hoon's voice was gentle but firm. Hana, this is not about you. This is not about us. Something beyond our understanding has happened, and we must proceed carefully. It's about her. Hana's eyes fixed on Gabriella with pure venom. It's been about her from the moment she fell through that ceiling and you looked at her like... She stopped, pressing her lips together hard. I saw your face, Ji-hoon. Everyone saw it. You saw shock, confusion, nothing more. I saw you come alive. Hana's voice dropped to a whisper, but in the echoing hall, everyone heard it. For the first time since I've known you, I saw you actually feel something. And it wasn't for me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ji-hoon's face had gone carefully blank, but Gabriella saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, saw the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Take the foreign girl to her quarters, he said quietly. Now. The first week in the eastern quarters passed in a blur of confusion and careful observation. The rooms were luxurious, silk cushions in deep blues and silvers, carved wooden screens depicting scenes of mountains and cranes, windows overlooking gardens so perfectly manicured they looked painted. But the guard stationed outside the door made it clear this was still a prison, however gilded. A young woman named Soo-jin was assigned as her attendant. She was gentle and patient, teaching Gabriella the basics of palace life. How to bow properly, how to sit in the restrictive hanbok, how to navigate the complex hierarchy of the court. Gabriella's strange clothing had been taken away for examination, leaving her dependent on the traditional garments Soo-jin provided. You're adjusting well, Soo-jin said one morning as she helped Gabriella dress. Most foreigners struggle with our customs for months. I don't have months, Gabriella replied quietly. Parliament is still deciding my fate, aren't they? Soo-jin's expression grew troubled. The debates continue. Some believe you are a spy, others think you are simply mad. A few, very few, entertain the possibility that your story might be true. And the Crown Prince? What does he think? The Crown Prince comes to the Eastern Gardens every morning, Soo-jin said carefully, adjusting the ties of Gabriella's hanbok. He walks the paths. He stops near your windows. He never asks to see you, but, she paused, everyone notices. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. Soo-jin's eyes were kind but worried. The palace has eyes everywhere, Gabriella, and the Crown Prince's interest in you, however innocent, is causing talk. Lady Hana's family grows more agitated by the day. The Queen Dowager watches everything. You must be careful. But being careful became harder as the days turned into weeks. Gabriella caught glimpses of Ji-hoon during her supervised walks through the gardens, always at a distance, always surrounded by advisors or guards, but his eyes would find hers across the carefully manicured spaces, each time something unspoken passed between them. Recognition. Curiosity. Something deeper that neither dared name. In her third week of confinement, everything shifted. Prince Min-jae came to visit her quarters late one evening, stumbling in with a guard's support, his face pale as death, and blood speckling the cloth he pressed to his mouth. "You're Ji-hoon's brother," Gabriella said, recognizing the young prince from the wedding ceremony where he'd sat below the thrones, watching everything with sharp, intelligent eyes. Half-brother, same father, different mothers. Min-jae collapsed onto the cushions, breathing hard. "I had to meet you. The girl who fell from the sky. The one who's causing so much chaos my mother can't sleep at night." "Your mother is the Queen Dowager." "Unfortunately, yes." Min-jae's smile was weak but genuine. "She's been keeping me isolated since you arrived. Afraid I might actually talk to you. Afraid I might like you." He coughed, harder this time. "She's right to be afraid. You're very sick." It wasn't a question. "Getting worse every week. The physicians are baffled." His voice dripped with irony. "Or at least they pretend to be." "You think someone is poisoning you." Min-jae's eyes sharpened despite his obvious pain. "Ji-hoon thinks so. He's been investigating for weeks, but he has no proof. And without proof, without his crown, without real authority..." He trailed off. "He's trapped. We all are." "Why come to me?" "Because you're the only unpredictable element in this entire suffocating palace. Because Ji-hoon looks at you like you're air and he's been drowning. Because maybe, just maybe, you're here for a reason." Min-jae leaned forward intently. "I heard you said in your country, you people are in the year 2026. So tell me, in your time, do you know about poisons? About how to detect them?" Gabriella thought of her pre-med semester, of late-night research for school projects, of documentary after documentary about historical murders. Some, enough to know, that arsenic leaves traces, in hair, in nails, in the body itself. "Then help us prove it!" Min-jae gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Help Ji-hoon, because if I die, and I'm dying, make no mistake, my mother becomes regent until a new second in line to the throne comes of age. And Ji-hoon?" His voice cracked. "Ji-hoon will spend the rest of his life married to someone he doesn't love, ruling a kingdom that's really ruled by his stepmother." That's a lot of responsibility to put on someone you just met. "You fell through the ceiling of a royal wedding. I think you can handle responsibility." Min-jae smiled despite the blood on his lips. "Besides, you're already changing things. Ji-hoon hasn't agreed to reschedule his wedding to Lady Hana. It's been 3 weeks. Parliament is losing patience. Hana's family is making threats. And still, he delays. Still, he walks past your windows every morning. Still, I what?" A voice from the doorway made them both freeze. Ji-hoon stood in the entrance, his face unreadable in the lamplight, his eyes moving between his sick brother and the foreign girl who'd turned his world upside down. "Still you care more than you should," Min-jae finished quietly. "Admit it, brother, she matters to you. More than duty says she should." The silence stretched, long and dangerous. Then Ji-hoon stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he looked directly at Gabriella without guards or witnesses or careful political distance between them. "Yes," he said simply, "she does. And that," his voice was rough with emotion, "is the most terrifying truth I've ever spoken." The silence in the room was deafening. Min-jae sat on the cushions, pale. Gabriella stood frozen, her heart pounding, and Ji-hoon remained in the doorway, his admission hanging in the air like smoke. Dangerous, undeniable, changing everything. "Yes," he said again, his voice rough. She matters to me. More than duty says she should, and that is the most terrifying truth I've ever spoken. Min-jae's expression softened despite his obvious pain. Finally, honesty. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten how. I haven't forgotten. Ji-hoon closed the door behind him, moving into the room with controlled tension. I've been drowning in honesty for 3 weeks. Honest about how impossible this situation is. Honest about how every day I don't reschedule the wedding, Hana's family grows more hostile. Honest about how Parliament threatens to crown you instead if I don't marry soon. His eyes found Gabriella's. And honest about the fact that I walk past these quarters every morning hoping to see you, even though I know I shouldn't. Brother, Min-jae began, but a violent coughing fit interrupted him. Blood spattered the silk cloth he pressed to his mouth more than before. Ji-hoon was at his side instantly, supporting him. You shouldn't be here. You need rest, medicine. Medicine that's poisoning me? Min-jae's laugh was bitter and wet. No, thank you. I'd rather die with clarity than live as mother's puppet. You're not dying. Ji-hoon's voice was fierce. I won't allow it. You have no authority to allow or prevent anything, remember? Min-jae's smile was sad. That's the problem. That's why I came here. Why I'm asking her. He gestured weakly at Gabriella. To help us prove what we both know is true. Ji-hoon looked between his brother and Gabriella, conflict written across every line of his face. This is too dangerous. If the Queen Dowager discovers you're investigating, she already suspects, Min-jae interrupted. Why else would she increase my medicine dosage this week? Why else would I suddenly be so much worse? He coughed again, harder. I'm running out of time, Ji-hoon. My mother doesn't love me. She only loves power. We both know it. So either we prove she's poisoning me now, or we watch her win everything. And if we prove it, if we expose her? Ji-hoon's hands clenched into fists. She's still the Queen Dowager. She still has supporters in Parliament. Moving against her without absolute proof could trigger civil war. Then we get absolute proof. Gabriella spoke for the first time since Ji-hoon entered, her voice steadier than she felt. In my time, we have ways to test for arsenic. It accumulates in hair, in nails. If Min-jae has been poisoned for months like you suspect, the evidence is literally written in his body. And how do we test for something when the royal physicians are likely complicit? Ji-hoon's voice was strained. The Queen Dowager controls who treats Min-jae. She prepares his medicine personally. Any physician who questions her methods mysteriously loses their position. Then we don't use the royal physicians? Gabriella moved closer to Min-jae, examining his trembling hands, the discoloration under his nails. There must be physicians outside the palace, people you trust who owe no loyalty to the Queen Dowager. There is one. Ji-hoon's expression was thoughtful now, calculating. Master Yoon, he served my father loyally, but the Queen Dowager dismissed him after the funeral, claiming he was too old. He lives in the city now, runs a small clinic for the poor. He looked at Gabriella with something like hope. You really think he could find evidence? If Min-jae has been systematically poisoned, yes, arsenic leaves traces. It's just a matter of knowing what to look for. Gabriella met Ji-hoon's eyes. But we need samples, hair, nail clippings, and we need to do this secretly. If the Queen Dowager suspects we're investigating, she'll destroy evidence and probably accelerate whatever endgame she has planned. Which is making me king, Min-jae said quietly. That's always been her endgame. Kill me slowly enough that no one suspects murder, keep me weak enough to control, then arrange an accident for Ji-hoon once I'm crowned. She becomes regent, and suddenly she's the true power behind the throne. The casual way Min-jae discussed his own murder made Gabriella's stomach turn. How can you be so calm about this? Because I've known for months. Min-jae's smile was weary. I'm not stupid. I know my mother doesn't love me. She loves what I represent. A path to power. The only question was whether Ji-hoon would figure it out before it was too late. He looked at his brother with genuine affection. I'm glad you did. Even if it took a girl falling through your wedding to make you see clearly. I should have seen it sooner. Ji-hoon's voice was thick with guilt. I should have protected you better. You were busy being the perfect crown prince, following every rule, meeting every expectation, sacrificing everything for duty. Min-jae reached out, gripping Ji-hoon's hand. But maybe it's time to break some rules. Maybe it's time to fight for what you actually want instead of what everyone expects. Ji-hoon's eyes flickered to Gabriella, and the intensity there made her breath catch. And if what I want is impossible, everything about her is impossible, Min-jae pointed out. She fell through time itself. Compared to that, defying Parliament seems almost reasonable. Despite the gravity of the situation, Gabriella almost laughed. I'm not sure reasonable is the word I'd use. Then what word would you use? Ji-hoon asked, and there was something vulnerable in his expression now, something raw and unguarded. Terrifying, Gabriella admitted. I've been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks of not knowing if I'll be executed or exiled or somehow sent home. 3 weeks of learning a world I don't understand, and 3 weeks of... She stopped, unsure if she should continue. 3 weeks of what? Ji-hoon's voice was soft, but his eyes demanded honesty. 3 weeks of watching you walk past my windows every morning. 3 weeks of catching glimpses of you in the gardens and wondering what you're thinking. 3 weeks of feeling like maybe I'm not as lost as I thought because you... She met his gaze directly. Because you look at me like I matter. Like I'm not just a problem to solve or a political inconvenience. The silence that followed was charged with everything they weren't saying. Min-jae looked between them, a knowing smile on his pale face despite his obvious pain. I'll leave you two to figure this out, he said, struggling to stand. But first I need those samples taken. Hair, nails, whatever you need. Let's prove my mother is a murderer before she succeeds in making me a corpse. The next hour was clinical and strange. Gabriella carefully collected samples from Min-jae, strands of hair from different parts of his head, nail clippings, even a sample of the tonic the Queen Dowager had prepared that morning. Ji-hoon watched with careful attention, asking questions about what Gabriella was looking for, how the tests would work. In your time, you can truly detect poison from these small pieces? Asked, fascinated despite the grim circumstances. Modern science can detect parts per billion. If Min-jae has been poisoned, we'll find it. Gabriella sealed the samples carefully in cloth pouches Soo-jin provided. The question is whether Master Yoon has the knowledge and tools to identify it here. He studied in China for years, Ji-hoon said, learned from physicians who treated emperors. If anyone in Joseon can identify poison traces, it's him. After Min-jae left, insisting he felt better after purging the morning's tonic, though he still looked dangerously weak, Gabriella and Ji-hoon were alone for the first time. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. You didn't have to do this, Ji-hoon said quietly. Help him, help me. You could have stayed silent, avoided political entanglements, focused on finding a way home. Is there a way home? Gabriella asked. The book disappeared when I arrived. I don't even know if it's possible to go back. Would you want to if you could? The question was careful, neutral, but Gabriella heard the tension underneath. She thought about Los Angeles, about Margaret's apartment and angry words, about having nowhere to belong, no one who truly saw her. Then she thought about the past 3 weeks, the confusion and fear, yes, but also the way Soo-jin had become a friend, the way Min-jae trusted her, the way Ji-hoon looked at her like she was something precious. I don't know, she admitted. 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now? She met his eyes. Now I'm not sure where home is anymore. Ji-hoon moved closer, and Gabriella could see the careful control warring with something wilder in his expression. You said I look at you like you matter. You're right. You do matter. more than I can afford, more than I should allow. His hand rose as if to touch her face, then stopped, trembling in the air between them. Do you know how many rules I'm breaking just by being alone with you right now? How many protocols I'm violating? I'm starting to get a sense of it, and yet I can't seem to stay away. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Every morning I tell myself I won't walk past your quarters. Every morning I do anyway. Every night I lie awake trying to solve the impossible equation of how to do my duty and keep you safe and expose my stepmother and save my brother and somehow impossibly find a way to... He stopped, jaw clenching. A way to what? A way to keep you here, with me, in whatever capacity the universe will allow. The admission seemed torn from somewhere deep. I know it's selfish. I know you deserve better than being trapped in a political nightmare. I know I have no right to want you when I'm supposed to marry Hana, but the heart doesn't care about supposed to, does it? Gabriella's breath caught. No, it doesn't. I'm going to take these samples to Master Yoon tomorrow, Ji-hoon continued, his voice rough with emotion. I'm going to prove the queen. Dowager is poisoning Minjai, and then I'm going to use that proof to break my engagement to Hana. Consequences be damned, because I can't... His voice cracked. I can't spend the rest of my life married to someone I don't love, while the woman who makes me feel alive stands in my palace as a prisoner. That's incredibly risky. Everything worth having is risky. Ji-hoon's hand finally closed the distance, his fingers gentle against her cheek. You fell through time itself to crash into my wedding. If that's not the universe telling me to pay attention, what is? Gabriella leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. And if Parliament refuses? If Hana's family threatens war? If exposing the Queen Dowager isn't enough? Then we'll find another way. And another. And another. Ji-hoon's thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I'm done sacrificing what matters for what's expected. You've taught me that much. I haven't taught you anything. You've taught me what? It feels like to want something for myself instead of for the kingdom. You've taught me that duty and desire don't have to be enemies. His forehead touched hers, and Gabriella felt his breath warm against her lips. You've taught me that falling is sometimes the only way to find where you truly belong. They stood like that for a long moment, close enough to close the distance, restrained enough not to. The tension was unbearable and perfect, a moment balanced on the knife's edge between what was and what might be. Then footsteps sounded outside, and they sprang apart like guilty children. Soo-jin entered, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes knowing. Your Highness, Lord Seok requests your presence. Parliament has called an emergency session regarding the continued postponement of your wedding. She glanced at Gabriella. And Lady Hana has demanded an audience with the foreign girl, tomorrow at dawn. Ji-hoon's expression hardened. Hana has no authority to demand. Anything? Her father does. He's threatening to withdraw military support unless the wedding is rescheduled within the week. Soo-jin's voice was grim. The situation is escalating, Your Highness. Let it escalate. Ji-hoon's voice was steel. I will address Parliament tomorrow after I've secured the evidence we need. He looked at Gabriella one last time, and the promise in his eyes was clear. This isn't over, not by a long way. After he left, Gabriella sank onto the cushions, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and something deeper. Soo-jin sat beside her, quiet and understanding. You're in love with him, Soo-jin said softly. It wasn't a question. I barely know him. Time is irrelevant when it comes to the heart. You've known him 3 weeks, but you've seen him more clearly than people who've known him for years. Soo-jin smiled gently. And he looks at you like you're the sun and he's been living in darkness. This is going to end badly, isn't it? Perhaps it will end in a way no one expects. After all, Soo-jin gestured at Gabriella. You fell through time. Clearly, the universe has a flair for the dramatic. Outside, lanterns flickered in the garden where Ji-hoon walked, samples hidden in his robes, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. And in the Queen Dowager's chambers, shadows moved as servants reported every word, every gesture, every dangerous moment of connection between a crown prince and the girl who had fallen into his world. The game was accelerating, and soon everyone would have to choose their side. Master Yoon's findings came back within 2 days, and they were damning. Arsenic in concentrations that should have killed Min-jae months ago present in every hair sample, every nail clipping. The evidence was irrefutable, scientific, and politically explosive. Ji-hoon moved with calculated precision, gathering allies in parliament who had grown uneasy with the Queen Dowager's increasing power, securing testimony from dismissed servants who had witnessed suspicious activities, building a case so airtight that not even the Queen Dowager's most loyal supporters could deny it. The emergency parliament session was called for the 5th week since Gabriella's arrival. The throne room was packed with nobles, ministers, military commanders, everyone who held power in the kingdom. Gabriella was brought under guard, positioned where everyone could see her, but she could say nothing. Lady Hana sat with her family, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. The Queen Dowager stood near the throne, her expression serene, confident she still controlled the narrative. Lord Seok called the session to order, his elderly face grave. We convene to address multiple urgent matters: the postponement of the Crown Prince's wedding, the status of the foreign woman, and new evidence that has come to light regarding Prince Min-jae's illness. New evidence? The Queen Dowager's smile didn't waver. Surely we should focus on the wedding first. Lady Hana's family has been patient, but the evidence cannot wait. Ji-hoon's voice cut through the murmurs, cold and absolute. He stood, and suddenly he wasn't just a crown prince. He was a king in waiting, commanding the room with presence alone. For months my brother has been dying. The royal physicians claimed his illness was natural, mysterious. They were wrong, or rather they were complicit. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Queen Dowager's smile finally faltered. Prince Min-jae has been systematically poisoned with arsenic, Ji-hoon continued, his voice carrying to every corner. I have testimony from Master Yoon, the kingdom's most respected physician, who examined samples of my brother's hair and nails. I have testimony from servants who witnessed the Queen Dowager personally preparing Min-jae's medicine, and I have... He produced a sealed vial, a sample of yesterday's tonic, which Master Yoon tested. It contains enough arsenic to kill a grown man within days. The throne room erupted in chaos, nobles shouting, ministers demanding explanations, guards moving towards the Queen Dowager who stood frozen, her mask of serenity finally cracking into something ugly and desperate. Lies, she screamed, her composure shattering completely. Fabricated by that foreign witch and her accomplices, she has bewitched the crown prince, turned him against his own family. You are not my family. Ji-hoon's voice was ice. You married my father for power. You bore Min-jae to secure that power. And when I stood between you and the throne, you decided to eliminate me by making my brother king and controlling him through poison and fear. He turned to Lord Seok. I have submitted all evidence to the right hand. I demand formal charges of attempted murder and treason. Lord Seok stood slowly, his lined face heavy with the weight of judgment. The evidence is overwhelming. Queen Dowager, you are hereby stripped of your title and authority. You will be held for trial on charges of attempted murder of Prince Min-jae and conspiracy to commit treason. He gestured to guards. Take her. The Queen Dowager fought as guards surrounded her, her elegant composure dissolving into raw fury. You'll regret this, all of you. That foreign demon has destroyed everything. She corrupted him, made him weak, made him forget his duty. She made me remember what matters, Ji-hoon said quietly, but his eyes found Gabriella's across the crowded room, and the emotion there was unmistakable. She reminded me that a king who rules without heart is just a tyrant with a crown. As the Queen Dowager was dragged away, still screaming accusations, Lady Hana rose from her seat. Her face was pale, her hands trembling, but her voice was steady. "And what of our wedding, Your Highness?" The title dripped with bitter sarcasm. "Now that you've exposed your stepmother, will you finally honor your commitment to me, or will you humiliate me further by choosing her?" She pointed at Gabriella with shaking finger. Ji-hoon faced her fully, and Gabriella saw genuine regret in his expression. "Lady Hana, you deserve honesty. You have always deserved honesty. The truth is, I cannot marry you. Not because you are unworthy, you are accomplished, educated, everything a crown princess should be, but because my heart belongs to someone else. It would be cruel to both of us to proceed with a marriage built on obligation rather than affection." "Cruel?" Hana's voice broke. "Cruel is making me wait 5 weeks while you fell in love with a stranger. Cruel is looking at her the way you've never looked at me. Cruel is—" She stopped, tears streaming down her carefully painted face. "I loved you. For 5 years I shaped myself into what you needed, and it was never enough because I was never her. I'm sorry." Ji-hoon's voice was gentle. "Truly. You deserve better than a prince who could only offer duty. You deserve someone who will love you completely. That person is not me." Hana's father stood, his hand on his sword. "You break this engagement. You insult my family, my house. We control half your military. One word from me, one word from you, and you commit treason," Lord Seok interrupted firmly. "The Crown Prince has just exposed attempted murder of a royal prince. He has proven the Queen Dowager's treachery. He stands before us having saved his brother's life and potentially prevented a coup. What he has not done is commit to a marriage that serves only political convenience." The old man's eyes swept the room. "Perhaps it is time we remembered that our future king is also a human being with a human heart." Murmurs of agreement rippled through Parliament. Not everyone. Lady Hana's father looked murderous, and several nobles appeared scandalized, but enough voices supported Ji-hoon that the tide was turning. "The crown prince must still marry to be crowned," another minister pointed out. "The law is clear." "Then I will marry." Ji-hoon's voice rang clear. "But I will marry someone I choose. Someone who sees me as more than a crown and a duty. Someone who—" His eyes found Gabriella's again, fell into my life impossibly, and made me believe in impossible things. The implication was clear. The throne room erupted in fresh chaos, some shouting approval, others outrage, everyone talking at once. Through it all, Ji-hoon walked toward Gabriella with steady purpose, the crowd parting before him like water. He stopped in front of her, and his carefully controlled mask fell away completely. She saw everything: the exhaustion, the hope, the fear, the love. "I know this is sudden," he said softly, though his voice carried in the expectant silence. "I know you've been here only 5 weeks. I know you come from a world I can barely imagine, and I'm asking you to stay in a world that has been nothing but chaos since you arrived." He took her hands in his grip warm and steady. "But I'm asking anyway. Stay. Stay and marry me. Stay and be my crown princess. Stay and teach me how to be a king who rules with heart as well as duty." Gabriella's throat was tight with emotion. "Ji-hoon, I don't know anything about being a crown princess. I don't know your customs, your politics. You know the only thing that matters. You know how to be honest, how to be brave, how to see people rather than positions." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Everything else we can learn together, if you're willing. Your parliament will never accept—" "Let me worry about parliament." Ji-hoon's smile was small but genuine. "I've spent 18 years doing what everyone expected. For once, I want to do what my heart demands, and my heart demands you, if you'll have me, if you'll have this impossible life. Gabriella looked at this man who had protected her from execution, who had fought for his brother, who had stood against his stepmother's treachery, who looked at her like she was air, and he was drowning. She thought about Los Angeles, about the bookstore, about Margaret's apartment where she had never belonged, and she thought about belonging here, with him. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, I'll stay. I'll marry you. I'll figure out how to be a crown princess if you'll figure out how to be a king who doesn't sacrifice everything for duty. Ji-hoon's face transformed, relief and joy and wonder combining into something incandescent. That sounds like a fair bargain. Then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. Then deeper, more certain, his hand cupping her face while hers tangled in his robes. The throne room erupted in shocked gasps and delighted cheers and scandalized protests, but neither of them cared. For one perfect moment, they were just two people who had found each other impossibly, against all odds, against all expectations. When they finally broke apart, breathless and grinning, Ji-hoon rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I've loved you since you fell through my ceiling, looking terrified and brave and completely impossible. I love you too, Gabriella whispered back, even though you're absolutely insane, and this is absolutely insane, and we're probably both going to regret how insane this is. Probably, Ji-hoon agreed, smiling, but at least we'll regret it together. Lord Seok cleared his throat loudly, a smile playing at his stern features. If the Crown Prince is quite finished with his public display of affection, perhaps we should address the small matter of formal betrothal, wedding arrangements, and how to explain to the kingdom that their future queen fell from the sky. We'll tell them the truth, Ji-hoon said, not taking his eyes off Gabriella. That sometimes the impossible happens, that sometimes magic is real, that sometimes a book can pull exactly the right person into exactly the right moment. He raised their joined hands, and that sometimes falling is the only way to find where you truly belong. 3 months later, on the first day of spring, Crown Prince Ji-hoon married Gabriella in a ceremony that was smaller, simpler, and infinitely more genuine than the wedding she had crashed. Min-jae stood as witness, healthy and whole, now that the poison had been purged from his system. Soo-jin wept happy tears. Even Lord Seok smiled. The book that had brought Gabriella through time was never found. Some said it had returned to wherever magical things go when their purpose is fulfilled. Others claimed it had been destroyed in the records-building fire. But on quiet nights, when Ji-hoon and Gabriella walked through the palace gardens under stars that looked the same in any century, she sometimes wondered if that warm, leather-bound book was sitting in another dusty shop somewhere, waiting for the next person who needed to fall into their own impossible story. And in Los Angeles, in a small antique bookstore, Mr. Chen would occasionally find a book on his shelves that he didn't remember acquiring, warm to the touch, filled with shifting Korean symbols, waiting patiently for tears to fall on pages that knew exactly where lost souls belonged. Some endings are really beginnings, some falls are really flights, and sometimes the most impossible love stories are the ones that were always meant to be. Hi guys, thank you for watching to the end. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Your encouragement will be greatly appreciated. I promise to bring more interesting stories like this. If you have any suggestions to make videos better, I would like to hear it. Until next time, love always.